Welcome to the No Matter What Club podcast. I'm Anthony Arranaga-Grayson, filling in for my husband Paulo because today we are turning the tables. Paulo and his brother Stephen Grayson are joining us in studio today along with Adrienne Glasser. Adrienne is a licensed clinical social worker and healing coach, a radical connector of humanness, a truth excavator, and experiential group maverick. Adrienne is a creative healer, psychotherapist, dance movement therapist, meditation teacher, and meaning maker. She currently oversees Beyond IFS, a community for experiential therapists, spirit seekers, meaning makers, healers, and coaches. This community enjoys and studies Beyond IFS parts work, a blend of experiential, somatic, and spiritual practices. These somatic practices lead to powerful, life-changing transformations for both clinicians and clients. Adrienne has been intuitively helping others find their creative path towards healing for 20 years. And Stephen Grayson, or Jude as some know him, is a dynamic entrepreneur and martial artist with a passion for education, business development, and community impact. With 34 years of martial arts experience, he holds a 7th degree black belt and is set to achieve his senior mastership this summer. A 9-time world champion, Stephen has built a reputation for excellence in competition, instruction, and leadership. As the driving force behind 3 Live Confident martial arts locations, he has cultivated a thriving martial arts community, helping students develop confidence, discipline, and life skills. His influence extends beyond brick and mortar schools through his Taekwondo online education company, making elite martial arts instruction accessible worldwide. Stephen's passion for teaching has also led him to create 4 traveling martial arts seminars where he trains and inspires students and instructors across the country. Additionally, he shares his expertise through business consulting, helping entrepreneurs grow and scale their business successfully. Beyond martial arts, Stephen is deeply committed to philanthropy as the founder of the MIMSI Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to supporting martial arts schools and individuals in need. Let's meet Adrienne and Stephen now. The No Matter What Club podcast. I'm Anthony Arranaga-Grayson, and the tables are turned today. I'm hosting, and our guests are Paulo Arranaga-Grayson and his brother, Stephen Jude Grayson. I know him as Stephen, but a lot of people call him Jude. And next to me on my left is Adrienne Glasser, who is internal family systems specialist, right? Can I say that?
Yeah.
Adrienne, talk to us about what is family systems. What is internal family systems?
Yeah, internal family systems is parts work. So a lot of people know the movie Inside Out. So it's almost as if the characters that are in Inside Out, like your anger, your sadness, that you learn to have a relationship with those parts, including addictive parts or alanonic parts that want to caretake other people. And you learn to work with them from your authentic self. And that heals trauma.
And so why do they call it family systems? What is that?
That inside we have like an internalized family of parts within us. So in the movie Inside Out, she has an internalized family within her that sometimes will mimic the way that we were raised. Sometimes it's adaptive and it doesn't, and sometimes it does.
And so today we're talking about bridging the gap, right?
Yes.
That's the topic of the podcast today. And we are trying to bridge the gap in Paulo's childhood and Stephen's childhood as well, how it's all connected. And Adrienne is going to sort of kind of assess what's going on throughout the lives here of these 2 young men. Okay, should we get started?
Yeah, let's do
Paulo, what happened? No, I'm kidding. Stephen and Paulo, both of you can kind of chime in. Tell us about like your childhood early on. What was the relationship like between the 2 of you?
You're older, you go first.
You know, my brother and I, looking back, I look back at my childhood very fondly. And I didn't always. You know, I didn't always appreciate, when I was in my disease of addiction, there was a part of me that like picked apart all of the stuff that didn't tell this narrative to me that like I was raised well and, you know, I was safe and we always had food on the table. We were always taken care of. But the resentments that I had built up, like always being compared to my brother or never being good enough, right? I had told myself these stories throughout my addiction, which then allowed me to put a large amount of drugs in my veins. And it was this driving narrative, like, you know, I'm never going to be my brother. I'm not going to be good enough. And, you know, fact of the matter is my brother was my biggest ally throughout my my life and my addiction. And our relationship is super special. And I'm just grateful that you're here today so that we can uncover, discover, and discard.
What's your reaction to what Paulo just said? What was your take on everything?
I always find it fascinating to hear you break down your perception of what it was like to grow up with me, because if you had like just now asked me to guess what you were going to say in that moment, I would have guessed none of those things. When you talk about what it was like for you to compare yourself to me, and then when you go into detail and you talk about what standards, that was never my positioning. That was never my even understanding of the dynamic in the house at all.
Well, what's crazy is I never got that from you, but I got it from our parents.
Yeah. And I wasn't aware that was really ever happening. I didn't understand in any way. It didn't feel that way, that like when I would get a win, a success, a good grade, that in some way that would come out in a negative way, whether it's like carrot stick motivation to you or something. It never occurred to me it was being used that way or that it could come up that way. For me, it was almost like a completely different relationship with success, because you were occupying so much of mom and dad's, I don't know if attention is the right word, but it felt all the time like success was the only option for me to get noticed at all.
Can I chime in for a second here? So what I know about my husband is that I feel like you feel the same about him and his success growing up. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, I think that, and maybe Adrienne can talk about if this is common. Like I felt like I wasn't getting the attention in the family. Both of my brothers were athletes, and so I would try to get negative attention rather than some attention. And is a classic middle child syndrome a thing?
It definitely is a role. It's a very common role. And you're finding that like, oh yeah, we each have a role in the family. Like very quickly you're realizing like, oh, there's a role. And very typically like there's a role of a scapegoat and there's a role of a hero. Like these are very common archetypes of different roles that get played out based on what the family is communicating is good or right or lovable.
We weren't allowed to get C's.
No.
Right. Right.
Getting a C in the Grayson household was like not a thing. And if you got a C, you were fucked.
Right. So you're seeing that there are rules and there are sometimes explicit, like it's explicitly said, but this could just be implied of like, but it seems pretty explicit. If you're not getting a C, if you're not getting A's, it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So like you're already seeing like lovability, all of that relates to achievement or as far as I know, winning. Even more so than achievement, like to win. When I think of an athlete, I think of like somebody has to win. Someone has to be achieving, but also has to be like, I don't know, it's almost like holy, right? So there's this hero role and then there's a scapegoat role. And this happens in addictive families, addictive dynamics all the time, where there are different roles that are being played. And then internally, you internalize those roles of like, oh, I'm like, the F up. Like I'm the person who's like not part of the family. I don't belong. And then you say, I would imagine you could speak to this. Like you say, screw it. And then you get negative attention because at least it's attention. It's a form of connection. So you find a way to have these polarized like kind of roles in the family and also polarized parts of you to then try to get a need met because you're not getting it met in some way. So then you're trying to get it met in that way and try and get like attention, love, connection, like by either being the screw up or by being the hero, but you're playing polarized roles that actually provide stabilization in the family because there's some function to it. Because if there wasn't a function to it, you wouldn't be in that role. So there was some function in your family for you to be in those roles. So that's the question. Like, why was that needed in your family?
So in this case, can we dial down on that
Yeah.
for a second? So the function of each of them. Do you know enough? Because I know we've had a conversation pre-taping recording of this podcast. What is the function here? of each
Yeah.
person.
So the question is like, well, how were you the scapegoat, or how, how is that your role? How were you like maybe the hero? Because you were both just talking to that. And
Well,
then why would that make sense to your family to have you in those roles?
I feel like it's interesting because when you were talking about like you felt like you had to be an overachiever because I was getting mom and dad's attention.
Right.
It's so interesting because I remember just as a kid, I talk about this a lot in my share, where like I didn't feel safe at home and I didn't feel safe at school. I knew from a very young age, like I probably like knew at like 7 or 8 that I was gay. And I didn't feel safe enough to verbalize. I didn't even know what it was. I just knew that the way that I was feeling wasn't okay. And I couldn't talk about that at school. I couldn't talk about that at home.
Punch in on like the context of why for the listeners to like connect where we grew up and when we grew up for like some of that moment for you. Because
where did we grow up?
When we say deep south, like deeper south than that. We grew up right outside of New Orleans in the early 90s, and like Ellen didn't have the talk show yet. So when Paulo's like, I didn't even know what that was, and he was feeling it, I definitely didn't know what it was, but I was watching signs of it. I remember walking in, and if he's 8, I'm 2 years younger than him, so I'm like 6-ish, and I'm walking in.
And I'm doing pliés in the living room.
Well, Paulo would do things that it would never occur to me to do. I remember walking in at a young age, and you were like wearing mom's high heels and stuff, and I was never curious in that way. So I'd watch these things, and again, to your point of not knowing what that was, in the Deep South, there's no representation of this on TV at the time. It definitely isn't talked about in our household or even in our localized communities. We're in a small city. Slidell is, tiny suburb of New Orleans at that time.
Yeah, and it's, it was a really tough time as a young gay boy, not knowing how to identify and not knowing how to fit in. And, we hear about this a lot, that like the rebellion is very, it's very common with figuring out who your identity is, right? Like, do you remember the gumballs of glitter?
No.
So my mom used to go to this store called the Winn-Dixie. I don't know if like that's a thing, but they used to have this like gumball machine, and they used to sell gumballs of glitter, of like a glue glitter. And so I bought these. I would go buy these gumballs whenever mom and I went to the Winn-Dixie, and then I would put the glitter on my eye and in my hair. And I don't know that Dad used the F-bomb, but like there was definitely this like, why is this like 6-year-old, 8-year-old kid running around with like glitter? It was like implied that like glitter was for girls, in that like socialized norm of like, this isn't what boys should be playing with. And I loved it. And we would be listening to music, and Steven would be like watching Tupac or whatever, and I'd be like, Mariah Carey,
Oh my gosh, it's so much. Stop. It is all of that. It would also be, we're home alone in the summer, and I'd be like watching Ghostbusters or whatever, and Paula's like, cool, my movie pick, Sister Act. And it was like, I'd be like, cool, let's watch Jurassic Park. And he'd be like, awesome. I have seen Spice World by force so many times. I know all the songs. Paula would be up doing the dances, and
you act like Spice World is not one of your favorite movies.
Yeah, I also like love it, and I probably quote Sister Act every single day.
And my favorite line from Spice World is she's about to have a baby, and she goes, the baby can't go too far. She's still wearing her pantyhose.
Oh my God. See, my favorite line is the one where she goes, oh, let me guess, what are you going to wear? The little Gucci dress. The little Gucci dress. See, I can quote the movie.
Yeah. But you were bonding over it, right?
We were.
Yeah, we were, because to us, this was a normal relationship, and we were really close because of the family work dynamic. Both parents had jobs. So Paulo, with us only being 2 years apart, I know that nature versus nurture conversation comes up, that it's truthfully, he's middle child, I'm youngest child, fine, okay, but our older brother is 11 years older than me. He went and joined the army. Like, there was a long spread where he was not in the house. So much of it was me and him. I was straight. He was gay. I mean, still is gay too.
And you're still straight.
And I'm still straight. And right, fair. And so we'd have those relationships. Like, well, what you just watched was very normal for us, right? And you see, we're like pretty physical. And then we would go to school with this relationship honed in like that. And it would not be received normal. Like, I definitely could tell, like, okay, our name is Grayson, right? My name is Stephen Grayson, and Stephen is spelled with a PH. Stephanie Gayson is what I got called, like, every day from everybody who thought they could get a laugh, because he and I, for many years, with very few in between, were in the same school system all the time. And like, that dynamic of play would just show up when, we'd hug each other, like just things that were a little more, I guess, culturally recognized as being more feminine in the way we dealt with each other. And I didn't notice or feel it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? We talk a lot about, and maybe y'all can talk about this, is like, even with him having a gay brother, he was still bullied, and how it impacted him. And I think that's going to be a really interesting topic of conversation. But like, even as him being the straight one who was bullied, imagine how I was bullied.
Right.
And how that impacted my feeling unsafe. And I do credit school bullies to a huge reason that, like, I went to addiction, to be honest. Like, it was like, kids are mean.
Bullying, I know, comes up a lot. I know it comes up for myself too, and a lot of people that we see come through the doors of No Matter What recovery. What is your experience with that in bullying and the effects of that long term for somebody?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that bullying very often is somebody targeting a part of somebody that is being rejected in them.
Huh.
So if somebody's bullying someone, let's say like for being gay, it's like they have gotten the message that that is not okay for them and that they should exile anything that resembles gay, right? And so that sort of exiling of parts of us that we're not allowed to be, or we've gotten the messaging that we're not allowed to be, we then fight against that internally and externally. And that's what bullies do. They fight against vulnerability. They fight against somebody being different because they've gotten the message that that's not okay for them. So they're taught to exile it within themselves and then to exile it within other people and to go after other people to try to exile it and to try to eradicate it. And we're dealing with this like pretty systemically right now.
Right. In the martial arts space, we obviously have to deal with that because bullying is definitely like one of the small breeding grounds that becomes a catalyst for physical confrontation, which is where self-defense can be honestly best practiced. If we can stop anything before it gets physical, that's the best way to not only help all parties involved with, walking away with their pride, de-escalating situations before anybody gets in physical trouble and then all the ramifications that come from that, but in so many ways, when someone expresses that, as you had talked about, when you're talking about something that a bully expresses to another person, usually someone they love treated them that way and they give it forward. There's this old martial arts mantra and it goes like this: if I were to give you a gift and you were to refuse the gift, to whom does the gift belong?
That's deep.
So if I was to bully you and you were basically to have the attitude of you're trying to give me this insult, give me this who I am and my identity isn't okay, I could just refuse it and say no thanks. And the problem is that person still has to sit with it. And if you want to dive deeper on that, someone probably gave them that gift and they are trying to give it away.
Yeah. Which is a burden.
It's a burden, right.
Basically they're holding burdens, like burdens that they got from their family about it's not okay to be gay. It's not to express any sort of affection towards like another, male, right? Like that's what we're talking about. Like, you can't express affection. All these things are burdens that then we're exiling against. And I see, just to answer your question, like I see folks struggling in their own recovery from real like abuse from bullies. And so much of what didn't happen at the time was protection. That's the piece that didn't happen, is that they didn't have protection.
From the parental unit?
From
or
the
from
parental
the family
unit,
system?
from the school, from the authority, from other students. In whatever way, there wasn't protection provided. And that creates the feeling of not being safe in your body. And so the repair years later, is that there's protection. And you can know that intellectually. Like intellectually, I can be like, yeah, I know I'm safe. I got me. But it's very different to like actually feel a sense of safety in your body and actually feel that and take that into your day-to-day life, because parts of us get stuck in time. They get completely stuck. They don't get that we're safe now. Parts just believe what they believed at the time. They're still stuck in school being bullied by the 8-year-old, right?
Right.
And so updating them somatically in the body, like that we're actually safe and that we're protected. Like I'm not gonna tolerate hate, right? Like I'm not gonna tolerate that. And that is how like parts of me that have been exiled then feel protected. Like I actually won't tolerate that. That's the protection that we need now.
I know, Paulo, we just kind of mentioned the story in another podcast previously, but when we were going out to a restaurant in Brentwood, and there was somebody that had, yelled a slur, and after the fact, Paul and I are okay. It was just somebody passing by yelling a slur, but we both commented how like it brought up feelings of when we were bullied as a kid. And me at 55 still feeling that from 50 years ago almost, 45 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's so weird how those inner parts kind of stay with us.
Yeah, because it stays in your nervous system.
Yes.
Like those experiences are deep within our body. And so we can know that we're safe all day, but until we actually like sit with the body experience of like that rattling that's happening and actually bring it breath and bring it groundedness and learn to work with it. I mean, this is what I do with folks in therapy, is like to learn to actually like work with the somatic experience of feeling like my body's being rattled. Because the body doesn't know the difference between, oh, I was bullied at 8 and right now somebody's saying a slur. The body doesn't actually differentiate that. So we have to bring it up to speed of like, no, like we're actually okay. Not from an intellectual place, but an embodied place.
When I finally came out, that slang, the slay, the saying, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you, right? Like that was like my mantra in school, right? Like it was like, no matter what you say, I'm not, but when I came out, I was like, I went from like closeted to like very gay, like in that small town of Slidell, Louisiana. Like, I mean, like it was like in your face. And I think my defense mechanism was, I'm going to put this in your face so that when you say that slur now, it's not going to affect me because I've already I leveled the playing field. Does that make sense?
No,
Did you see that?
Oh, 100%. You're the way you would, your flamboyant nature. First off, you can take over a room because you and I both have like, and our oldest brother as well, like a level of charisma that we would probably all attribute mostly to our dad, the ability to like work a room and like public speak. All of us ended up in that kind of arena. You would use that and you would create this effect on the room. And look, tons of people really love that. You always had like, 6 chicks hanging around you and it's like always friends, but you were a guy around 6 chicks all the time, no matter where we were in school, no matter what, what was going on. And then when you would leave the room and it was just me, the wake around you was like apparent. People would talk to me about your personality. And so much of the time, you were almost aggressive with that, people would say like, you're putting it in their face, but I totally get why the best defense is a good offense. A person who is constantly scared of you taking what I feel about who I am as a person and throw it in my face, you can't do that if I don't give you a chance to talk. And you would and it was cool. Like some people really enjoyed it because you're very entertaining. If that's your style, you were super funny to listen to. You were you've always been a great storyteller. definitely attributes to like so much of your success today. But yeah, all those things were apparent back then. You just like used all these gifts in this one way, particularly at school.
The thing that stands out to me the most in your relationship is how much of an ally you are to your brother. Like, you are such an ally that is the piece that stands out to me the most.
I'm going to get emotional talking about it because, like, for gay kids that don't have this, right? I don't know where I'd be without it. You've just always kind of been this, like, measuring stick of, like, how I navigate life. It's interesting because it's, Stephen and I at some point were like, we're going to write a book and we're going to do like all this stuff. But when, we always talk about how interesting it is, like growing up in the same household, same ethics, same morals, same everything. And we ended up going two completely separate directions in life, yet we've always aligned here.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's very interesting.
I think so. And I also think, very uniquely, like if you're looking at it almost experiment wise, like a petri dish, like you and I also have same genetics. We have our parents were together the whole time, sometimes in a, cause I have stepkids, sometimes in a stepkid dynamic, maybe there's more influence cause you're spending more time at one house, and like we had none of that. 2 years apart, same school system, same everything. And it wasn't like I did martial arts and you did nothing. You were also altar boy, Boy Scouts, all that stuff. Like it wasn't
the
like you were
youngest Eagle
inactive.
Scout in the state of Louisiana.
Serve it.
How many merit badges?
All of them. He had all of the merit badges.
I'm not surprised.
He had now. Was he really in it for the sash? Maybe. You were Order of the Arrow and like
I was Order of the
everything.
Arrow and I got the Catholic Award, and so there.
And that's that winning word you had brought up coming up again, right? Like in our house, and it's so funny. I heard you say that, and I want you to talk about your experience with this. It wasn't just winning; it was in our house, or at least it felt this way. Any metric of success in A. It could have been attendance. It could have been getting honor roll as much as winning first place, as much as a badge. Like for our parents' level of communication and being with us, having at least that's my experience. Yep. And maybe that's just because I felt like I had to bring proof to the party. And if I'm just like deep diving on that, it felt like anything to get them to not look at you, trophy. Look at this. I got another A. Look at that, I got another thing. And if I could do that, I could get them to pay a little more attention to me. I remember once you were going to a Boy Scout trip, and Dad we hit this age where Dad just kept Boy Scouting with you and Mom kept Taekwondoing with me when there was the divide, right? And like we had to turn around and go back because in the amount of time as we were driving to the tournament, you had already gotten like kicked out of some Boy Scout camping trip. And it was like that I
think we were putting shaving cream in people's hair while they were sleeping.
Right, I'm sure it was just, it's like little kid at a Boy Scout trip stuff, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it was like another moment where I'm supposed to be getting in the zone, doing my thing, and it's getting ripped away because Paulo
fucked up again.
But at least that's what's being said in the car on the way. Like I wouldn't know, but like so for us, even the negative sides of it, it was always this like metric of success. At least that was my experience. Did you feel like that to you?
Yeah.
Did it feel like that to you?
Yeah, I always felt like my positive recognition turned into, when I got Eagle Scout, I kind of just dropped out of Boy Scouts, and then I kind of wasn't getting the attention. So that's when the rebellion and the negative attention seeking started. But like what's funny is, after we hear all that, right, the part that I focus on is Stephen had a karate tournament the same day as I had my Eagle Scout project, and Mom went to the karate thing. And I was and for years I held on to, well, you chose to go over to his karate tournament over my Eagle Scout project, right? And like, it's the narrative, the storytelling that we kind of, and at some point I didn't know, well, we're kids. One parent has to be somewhere and one parent has to be somewhere else. That's like the logical thing to understand. However, like in my young kid head, I didn't get that. And I felt like they were choosing Stephen over me.
What was in your young kid head, Stephen? Did you resent Paulo?
Yes, for sure, but in different waves. My first initial reaction when you asked that was, I noticed that my brother wasn't at my tournament. Like, there was a time when my brother stopped coming to my tournaments and he wasn't around me. That's funny that you digested it as mom chose me. I digested a lot of that as, well, dad already doesn't come to any of my tournaments, whether you have something or not, because dad hit a spot where, just work didn't allow that and dad wasn't coming to my tournaments. It was just me and mom, and you stopped being there at some point. And for me, I was like, okay.
So this is what happens in family systems where everybody's vying for the parent's attention.
Sure.
And then my question is usually like, what is happening in your family system that y'all are having to fight this hard to get attention?
You get into this chicken and the egg problem, right? Like, all that's happening and Paulo sneaks out of the house. Now, what do?
They fight.
And as you watch that continue to like snake eat its tail, continue to like push, Paulo dealt with the ways he chose to rebel the same way he dealt with the bullies and the same way he dealt with his Eagle Scouts. Paulo's a winner, and he's going to win. And if he's going to be bad, he's going to win at that too. Like, Paulo was going to do it in an in-your-face way where mom and dad had to address it. And it wasn't like whenever you would mess up or do something it was never like where mom could pull you on the side and be like, hey, look, I'm not going to tell dad, but like, straighten that up. It was so in your face. It's to a point where it has to be addressed like all the time.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how it felt for me.
For sure.
Right? Because I'm watching it happen. I don't know how many of those things happened that I wasn't aware of.
At 16, when I left my parents' house at 16. I had the end of my 15th year, about to turn 16. And I left my family, my brother, I left everything, right? And the reason that led to that is because in that time, and I share about this in my share, and I'll never forget this moment, I walked into a gay bar. And when I give my share, I always say that in that gay bar, Deborah Cox, Nobody Was Supposed to Be Here, was playing. I'll never forget it. I won't forget the smell of the bar. And I took my first safe breath. And that breath was, I didn't have to be somebody that I wasn't. And that feeling trumped anything else that was going on at home. The chaos, the relationships that I had built. It was like I needed to feel that sense of safety and that sense of community that I was chasing my entire life. I got addicted to it.
Yeah.
Very, very fast.
I've heard you give your share like half a dozen times. I don't know that part has ever stood out to me the way it did right now. And maybe it's the context that like stirred us up to it. So the timeline of it made more sense to me. But it didn't occur to me that you could have that kind of feeling. I had the exact same experience in martial arts. And it was very unique. And it's one of the reasons I'm no longer like on the mat every day as the chief instructor in my own school, because I travel and teach. But when I was the chief instructor at my school, I had a huge gay community of athletes, of student athletes, because I could empathize with one thing in particular, and that was this idea of like building a safe space to rebrand who you are. And for me, no matter what I got called at school, and it wasn't all the time. I definitely obviously didn't get it at the level you did, or at the level that like some of the viewers here, like obviously bullying could have been way worse than what I got. Mine was just complicated. It's weird to get bullied or called gay in front of a girl you like while not being gay, but it feels weird to be like, I'm not gay, because it's like, well, being gay is fine. You're using it in a weird way and weaponizing that at me. I'm not gay, but if that's my only way out of it, you still kind of get away with saying gay is bad. And now you're like shitting on my brother. He's not here to defend himself. So I was in this complex situation all the time, but I'd go to Taekwondo and there's a hierarchical system there, much like in the Boy Scouts or in Altar Boys, some of the stuff you were affiliated with, but the hierarchical system uses last names and formality, very militant wise. So no matter what I got called at school, Stephanie or Gayson or whatever, all the other slurs that they were using in the 90s. I'd go to Taekwondo class and I could be Mr. Grayson and I could redefine who I was through meritocracy, through my fists. I could fight my way out. I could win enough tournaments. And not all that was for my parents. So much of it was for that exact feeling that you just described. When I left home or left school and I walked into the Taekwondo school, everybody would turn or they would bow or they would greet me in a certain way that showed reverence because of how dynamic of an athlete I was. So for me, it was very simple. Outwork everyone and I can be whoever I want to be. And for me, that was my version of that. The way you said I could just breathe. Cool. I can do that. I can just sweat more.
So we have two different stories here
Right.
of feeling safe. Right? Like, what are you thinking right now?
Yeah, because at the same time, your burdens were the same. The protection was completely different and polarized, right? Like you're doing the thing you're not supposed to be doing. You're trying to do it perfectly. But in both ends, it's like you're not allowed to be you. You're not allowed to be like authentically you. And so you both found communities where, okay, if I can play by this book, like for, then there is the ability to be me. Or if I'm in this community, I can finally be me. Like there is this permission for both of you to finally be more authentic in some way. But it also came with other things.
Right.
So this is the first version of the authenticity that you're finally able to get. It's like a glimpse of the authenticity that you're finally able to get because you have a similar burden around not being able to be who you are and be loved for who you are.
And not necessarily at home, but at school or wherever.
Yeah.
Right.
When you were bullied, because I know you talk about that a lot, is what we're saying, does that resonate with how you kind of handled it?
For sure. I think for me, when I felt that feeling of I'm safe, was when I left not home, not the home where my parents were, but home where I grew up, the city where I grew up, because for me, that was where all the bullying happened outside of the home. And so it was, very scary for those inner parts for me. But when I went to college, I found my, nobody's supposed to be here moment in just drinking. And at college parties, but still having to wear
My husband was a frat boy.
the mask. Yes, and a Sigma Chi. But I had to wear that mask, in that fraternity, and for some reason that kind of felt safe, and then it gradually developed into it finally going into a club and feeling that moment for myself. So, but yeah, I find it so interesting, the different, because I know both these stories, but never in this context before, in this format. And I just found, your part of it really fascinating too, where you had that moment of, finally, I'm out of the shadow of Paulo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Paulo and I share our stories together, that was something he brought up to me that, this is going to get a little meta, sorry, that I didn't realize that he didn't realize about my story. I thought it was so obvious that that's what was going, but I didn't in any way, I don't think at the time, maybe subtly, I don't think I deeply appreciated what Paulo's experience with that was like for him, or Paulo's experience with me was like for him, because when I'm growing up doing these things, Paulo gets in trouble. I remember there's this one moment where I'm 14 years old and my mom sat in my lap in a chair and Paulo did something and she's crying on my shoulder telling me how she's a bad mom and I'm comforting her. And for me, that was my experience, and it never made me feel different about Paulo. It made me feel bad for my mom and wanting to comfort her so I could just go win bigger. I'll just go win more. I'll just go fight. No problem. Whatever you need, Mom. it didn't occur to me in any way. It didn't change how I felt about Paulo. None of that interaction did. So I didn't ever see your way of receiving what I was doing. I couldn't have seen it the way you've explained your experience with me competing and stuff.
When I was in my addiction, I never thought about how it impacted my family. Yeah. You know, like that wasn't ever a thought. Like I knew it must not have felt good, right? But like to hear that, like me trying to live my authentic life and trying to figure out who I was as a gay man, which usually, you know, for a lot of us, it does end up in like substance use disorder. Like substances are a huge part of the gay lifestyle, you know? And so for me, trying to figure out who I was as a gay man and like navigate all of that, like here, it breaks my heart to know that like my mom had to lean on my 14-year-old brother at the time for support. And like, you know, at the end of the day, I hate that I had to put you in that position, but also like my intention was never to hurt anybody. My intention was just to find my place in life.
That's right. Yeah. And that's an important thing for you to know, that your intention was just to find your place. And I'm just going to say, disclaimer, like, I really get that parents are always doing their best given what they got. And I'm just going to say that.
For sure.
And
that's what helped me get over the kicking me out at 16 because I was gay, and the beatings that I took, and the, you know, like the whatever, the narrative that I had told myself. When I did my work in a 12-step program, that's when I realized my parents are just as broken, but you know, my parents just taught us what they learned.
That's right.
And they did the best they could with what they had.
Yeah. And that being said, they had their own unmet needs that came out towards you. I mean, at 14, you shouldn't be counseling your mom. You know, that's a choice that she made based on her limited resources, and she's probably doing the best that she could, right, at the time. And then at the same time, you're feeling guilty because she's relying on you at 14.
Sure.
And then I kind of just see like, oh, well, what was happening for your mom, that she was relying on a 14-year-old to get her needs met? And, you know, what's happening for your dad, that he's struggling with, you said addiction? Alcoholism, yeah. Right? And so I'm sort of looking at this of like, well, what's actually happening at home where like, this is what's happening too, where a 14-year-old is becoming the counselor. And I mean, I also relate to this personally. I became my family's social worker unofficially at 16 because of what was happening around mental health and addictions. And it's because of their unmet need. And then if somebody is acting out in the family, it's an easy thing to point at of like, this is the problem. You're the identified patient. You're the identified client. The addiction is the problem. When there's something happening where people's needs aren't being met, not just the person who's struggling with addiction. And this is every addictive family system that I've ever seen, including my own, right?
Can you speak more to that? Like the way you talked about our roles, right? So that's so weird because, you know, we obviously always feel like our dynamic is so incredibly unique. And then, you know, in just talking to you a few times, you're like, oh yeah, by the way, that happens all the time, and it's got a name, and it's blah, blah, blah. And then you started guessing stuff about us, and I was like, okay, that's crazy. Yeah. Like there was one moment where you were like, based on there's themes, that's what you said, right? And you were like, there's this one thing, I don't remember exactly how we got there, and you were like, yeah, usually. So when that person passes, they become like, you predicted that he and like my brother and I would kind of put my mom on this pedestal without knowing parts of our story. And I was like, yes, I named an entire foundation after her. Like, you like guessed all that. Is what we're experiencing fairly normal to the roles, or to
Absolutely.
What was the word, themes?
Yeah, to the themes of what happens in family systems when there's addiction, is that there is usually a parent that is put on a pedestal or idolized, and another parent is usually struggling with addiction. I mean, it can look, you know, both parents could be struggling with addiction too. It's not one way or the other, but there's very often like an idolized family member or sometimes it's just straight up neglect, right? So there can be all different ways that what's not happening in terms of the parents' needs gets filtered into the kids and what the kids are experiencing. So it can often be an idolized parent that's like the good one who's saving, who's being hurt, who's being a victim of the situation. And then there can be someone who's also struggling with addiction. And then there could be, just complete neglect where there's nobody home at all, where there's like literally like no needs are getting met, nothing's getting addressed. And then a kid is acting out and everyone's like, why are they acting out? We don't know why and it's like none of their needs are getting addressed.
And some of that was
gets
big
filtered
for
through
our
the family.
generation. That one moment you talked about, just being home alone. Like some of it was just.
We were home alone at a very young age, and it's like, come home when the street lights come on.
It was just years of both parents working.
Yeah.
And it felt very normal. Like all my friends had a very similar
we didn't lock the doors. It was like, kids were coming over. We were over at the kids' houses. Parents.
But looking back, you and I were alone
from a very young age.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
And also it allowed you to bond and connect the way that you have.
Yeah. And I look back and again, today, I look back at the way that I grew up very fondly. And it took years to get there, right? Mm-hmm. Because as a drug addict and alcoholic, I'm always looking for what's different, and be able to like tell this narrative and like make somebody else the enemy so that I had an excuse to use. And so that's not really where we're at anymore. And I'm able to look back at my childhood and be like, yeah, I'm okay today. And I was okay at the time. And, I also credit, like we grew up in a weird time, right? Time when we had a house phone and then we had pagers and then we had dial-up internet and then we had, fast, high-speed internet. Like it was weird. Like it was a weird time to like,
for sure,
grow up and be in our formative years because like technology was advancing as we were. Like we were in the like Walkman era and then the Sega era and then the
buy ringtone on your cell phone era.
Buy a ringtone on your.
You go into junior high, their cell phones don't exist, and then by 10th grade, everyone has. Like, what was that?
We're in the chat room era,
well,
where like if you're gay,
so
that's where
I
you're
was
going.
in AOL, New Orleans, M for M. Dial-up chat rooms. By the way, the computer was in his bedroom.
I'm not ready to learn all these things.
But yeah, I mean, it was like trying to figure out who I was as a gay man online and having to wait 10 minutes to be able to like get on there, and it takes 40 minutes to download a picture, and it was just a weird time.
Yeah, and then we have all these folks that are coming, and it's like, well, I can't get off the apps. It's like, well, that was your first time being able to be a gay man, and be able to be open and be able. Is like through AOL and through chat rooms, and like that's how it all started. So it's like so often like that is such a big piece that I think needs to be normalized when it comes to like chemsex addiction, and like when that piece comes in, it's so much of it was like online, and all of the AOL and all of that was like first experiences.
Yeah, it was a weird time.
Yeah.
The name of my brand is Live Confident. And I have to explain that part all the time. And it is not necessarily that I am confident. It is that it's like a call to action, like a mission statement, where our objective is when I'm done interacting with you and I leave the room, you should feel more confident for having interacted with me. It's almost my responsibility to help other people feel better about themselves as a human in that space. And for you, I just have always wanted to see you win. So when it came to like going to check on you when you were living in Chicago and being like, I'd come home and mom would hit me with the quiz, like, how's he look? How's his health? What's his weight? What's his teeth look like? You think he's using? You think he's, and she'd quiz me, and then dad would pull me to the side and I'd get the same quiz from dad. And it's coming from a place of concern, but I don't.
Sorry, I'm sniffling so much.
For me, it was just always about wanting to see you win. I think that sometimes the dynamics, the way you describe them, can feel adversarial. But for me, it was never like that. In this thing called game theory, there's this concept of zero-sum games and non-zero-sum games. A zero-sum game works like this. In order for me to win, my win is conditional on your loss. Think of chess. I have to make you lose and take your king in order to win. A non-zero-sum game is my win is tied to your win. Think of a game of chicken. There's no way for you to win without giving me a win. There's no way for you to lose without also forcing me to lose. And as your younger brother, it felt my whole life never adversarial. I never thought a single win would ever take away from you. If anything, it kept the peace. It made the house easier to deal with, and maybe mom would be, in a good mood, and dad's happy, and the house is safe, and I could just do that for you. And I've always wanted to be in your corner in that way. And whether it was being, the first one to check on you, or whether it was, these beautiful stories you said, but it's the other way too. I didn't want to win without you there too. I didn't do it to like, hey man, I'm having a baby, get your life together. It was like, hey man, I have a win on the horizon. I need you on my Runyon Canyon. Like, I need you here at my sunrise. You have to be here for mine too. I'll win without you, but I really don't want to. And that's what your timeline of addiction always felt like to me. Never like I could fix it for you or stop you or convince you, but more that I was like always trying to see you win and do better in your life. And then same thing for me, like every time I won real big, I want you to be there with me because I feel like our wins are tied together.
And it really feels like the win that happened in that moment was the heartbreak that you had. It was the heartbreak that actually created connection. And it's the connection that allows for you to have the wins together. It's that invitation of you saying, hey, I want you on my team. I want you. And that's the connection. It's the fabric of the connection that is the outreach. That's the power that really helps people to like see glimmers of hope that maybe there could be a different way. I mean, I don't know about you, but in my own recovery, there's just been like these magical people that have been this like glimmer of hope that there could be a different way of connecting, a different way of being, that gave me like the hope to believe that there could be another way, like another way out. And that connection is like these glimmers of hope. And to me, like that can raise someone's bottom of like, oh wait, there's actually like a different way of being or connecting. It can allow people to come out of isolation, which is such a huge part of the disease of addiction, of like these glimmers of, and I find that in people's recovery, like in everyone's recovery story, there are these like moments of hope of like, well, someone came to me and they tried to connect. And of course there's the parts of us that have like shame or feel like, oh, well, we couldn't do it then, but it was the hope that the connection could happen and that it could be there, of you being the ally, of you being connected as brothers and as family members. And it's that fabric of connection that is what bridges the gap in people's recovery.
Come on, tying it all in with
I
bridging
did.
the gap.
You're bridging the
Good.
gap.
That was good.
We're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. Adrienne, where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me at adrienneglasser.com. I'm here in Los Angeles doing trainings for therapists and for folks that want to be learning internal family systems and compassion-focused therapy.
Do you see individual clients too?
I do. I see individual
They wanna see their
clients.
parts?
I love allowing people to get to know all of their parts. But the thing I love the most is being able to teach folks how to get to know their own system. So I do that in groups and intensives. So yeah, that's the main focus. So I run intensives for people in recovery and for intensives for therapists that want to be able to learn this model.
And you did a really cool event this weekend.
Yeah, I also do movement journeys, which is like super fun. And Mel and I, who's been on the podcast a bunch, who works with all of you, obviously, they do breath work and we do a movement journey together. Yeah.
And Stephen, besides being a martial artist, there's something else that's near and dear to your heart, which is the Mimsy Foundation. Do you want to give a plug to that really quick?
Yeah, absolutely. The Mimsy Foundation is the foundation I created after my mom passed away. That's what everybody called her. That was her grandma name, which was Mimsy. The foundation is specific to martial artists from our organization and kids around the world who need money. If money is the barrier to stop them from great opportunities, there were 2 times in my Taekwondo career where we needed money. I was about 9, and my mom brought me into Rick Weems, who was my instructor, brought me into Rick Weems' office so I could quit Taekwondo because they couldn't afford it anymore. And he ripped up my mom's contract and said, pay when you can. And my mom taught me that, people never forget when you help them with money. And then the second time was after like 7 years of being undefeated in my organization in forms and fighting, I had an opportunity to go to Korea and fight for 3 months at 17 years old with 2 college Olympic fighting teams. And it was just once in a lifetime chance, but my mom couldn't find the money. We just couldn't afford it. I had earned the spot, everything was mine, but I had this financial barrier. And so my mom got with the community, helped fundraise. In fact, the hair salon next door not only did a cut-a-thon, donated all that money, the owner, she's chairman of the board on the foundation today. So she's
Hi, Vinci.
Hi, Vinci. She was helping us fundraise back then, and she's helping us fundraise now. There's a school in Brazil that just flooded, and we were able to give them $6,000. We did a event this past Friday up in Idaho, a board breakathon, where we raised $15,000, and we just take all that money through the foundation and give it to kids who need it, from everything from they need equipment, or they have an opportunity to go fight in another country, or international students who want to come fight us Americans for world titles, and just kind of trying to keep my mom's legacy of there was a time when I was good at martial arts and money was the barrier. And if I can honor my mom by just removing that barrier from other martial artists, I want to. So check us out, mimsyfoundation.org, or on Instagram.
Paulo, did we bridge the gap today?
We did. I feel like we could have like 4 more of these episodes because we have so much to unpack. But, I think one of the things that I really wanted to say is like, yes, our relationship is unique, but our family dynamic is not. Mm-hmm. And so what I think happened today is by us being able to share a little bit of our story, hopefully there's a young LGBT or queer kid out there who is navigating this, and or they're in their disease and they're trying to they're scared and they're trying to figure out their life. And like, my relationship with my family, we talked all this about my dad. My dad walked me down the aisle when I married Tony, and like I have a beautiful relationship today. And my dad's ready to be a grandfather when Tony and I have a kid, and we lost our mom together. We were able to walk through that together. And like, family is so complex and so challenging, and it probably does cause a lot of people to drink and use. It did for me. But like, when we got to the other side of it, like, we are able to be together and share holidays together and stories together and raise our kids together and like be an aunt and uncle to my brother and my brother's kid. And like, like, there is hope beyond addiction. And like, being from the South, I had every card stacked against me. And what's crazy is like, I had told myself all of this, that like my family didn't support me and love me and all of this stuff because I was gay. And like, it was just internalized messaging, I think, from all of the things that I was getting as a kid. And like, what I would say is like, I'm just grateful for our relationship, and hopefully that's y'all watching or listening out there, like, know that like, you can get sober and have a beautiful life and build your relationship back with your family if that's something you want to do, or figure out that maybe family isn't best for you when you do the work. And not everybody's story is our story, but I wanted to be able to share the magic of the Graysons with the world.
Yeah, because hope for connection is definitely possible. Like those moments of hope, of connection, starting with Spice World, really. We from little kid to now, just seeing those glimmers of hope, right? The glimmers of hope that happen from childhood to adulthood is part of what connects families. And you can also have chosen family. Like if you aren't getting it in the family that you're in, like there's chosen family that people have in recovery. And there is glimmers of like real hope and connection that's possible. That's really different from anything we've ever known or, you know, what we could ever imagine. So yeah, just really having those glimmers of hope for connection that can make our lives so different, and that you're living it, right? Like you're living that there's connection that's really different now.
So I want to thank you all for being beacons of hope today on the podcast. Thank you all very much. Have a safe trip back to Louisiana. We all love you so much. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Paulo, this is episode 10 of season 1, and season 2 is going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned. And for now, be sure to subscribe, like, follow, and all the things on social media, YouTube, and your favorite streaming platform. I'm Anthony Arranaga-Grayson, Paulo Arranaga-Grayson. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Yay, thank you. Thanks, everybody.